Hey everyone, this is Marty. I've got a cold this week, so I might sound stranger than usual. This is episode 4 of Nepal Now right now, where we share feedback from listeners and news about migration and Nepal. So I want to start by giving a big thank you to Trilok, who contacted me on LinkedIn. He told me that, and this is very embarrassing, in episode number 1 of the podcast, of Nepal Now podcast. So we're talking almost exactly 4 years ago now, the very first episode. There was a typo in the very first sentence where it said COVID started in Nepal in 2000 instead of course, 2020. So I corrected that in the text and I went back and listened, and that mistake is not in the audio, which is great. I can't believe it stayed there so long without me or someone else noticing, but it did until Trilok came along. So thanks again, Trilok, for doing that. He also gave me an idea for an episode about reintegration of migrant workers who return to Nepal with some skills but not the right skills to find decent jobs, and how people are working to kind of bring those two things together so people can return and be employed and look after their families. So I'm hoping to focus an episode on that pretty soon. As I've said before, I'd like to get more feedback like that from Trilok. You can use LinkedIn as he did. You can email me at nepalnowpod@gmail.com. You can text at the link at the very top of every episode description. It is a US number, so if you're not in North America, you'll have to pay messaging charges. And I especially would like to hear about people about to leave the country or about to come back. And hopefully they would be willing to speak to me about their plans. Okay, another note. If you listen to the show on Google Podcasts, that option will apparently soon be discontinued. Google Podcasts is disappearing, so you'll need to find a new app. Nepal Now is available on most of them: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, PocketCasts, Deezer, and many more. So please don't forget to make the switch. And now on to some news about migration. Last week's Nepali Times had a very poignant piece about 12 Nepalis killed while fighting with the Russian army. They have brief descriptions with quotes from family members and, in some cases, the migrants themselves, which raise many, many questions to me. But at its core, it really reveals the desperation of people who go to Russia hoping that they can raise enough money to look after their families. On a related note, the government of Nepal last week hosted a job fair at various places across the country. There was one here in Kathmandu that I wanted to go to, but I didn't make it. So if you happen to go in Kathmandu or anywhere else in the country and you want to share something about that, please let me know. I'd be happy to hear how it went. You might have seen that a few days ago I posted on social media a statistic that really amazed me. It comes from the International Day of Family Remittances by the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD. And it said that smallholder farm families, so the smallest farms in the country, earn 80% of their household income from the money sent home from migrant workers, so remittances, and only 20% from agriculture. That really, really surprised me. And it's yet again a reminder of the importance of labor migrants and, of course, remittances to Nepali families and to the country as a whole. By the way, the links for all of these news items I'm discussing will be at the bottom of the description to the notes for this show, if you want to check them out. The final piece of news I saw this week, it was something I'd never thought about before. It's from Hong Kong, and it said that 1 out of 5 Nepali youth living in Hong Kong had been forced by their families to return to Nepal, mainly for two reasons. The first, to remove them from a relationship, to get them out of a relationship that the family was worried about, opposed to, etc. The second reason was to cut back on family expenses, because, of course, it's more expensive to live in Hong Kong than Nepal. Some background on this: many Nepali families settled in Hong Kong because one of their members had joined the British Army, the famed Gurkha regiment of Nepali soldiers. So there's a huge Nepali population here, and of course, they still have family in Nepal. I think it's quite easy to go back and forth if you want to or need to. Okay, that's it for this week. Coming up next week, we're going to be speaking to Prakash Gurung, a young fellow I met when I hired him as a Patao driver. He keeps trying to go overseas but hasn't succeeded so far. So I'm talking to him about why it's so important for him to go overseas. That's coming up next week on Nepal Now on the Move. That's it for this week, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.